Hello, welcome to Week 2, Part 1. This presentation is going to center you for Week 2, give you an overview of all the things that you need to do this week. And the first thing is going to be to listen to the next episode of Serial Episode 2, The Breakup. This episode is all about Adnan and Hay's relationship. It talks about how Adnan and Hay's parents feel. It talks about how Adnan and Hay's friends feel about their relationship. And I want you, before you start to listen to this episode, I would like you to do a little bit of writing. I want you to think about your own experiences in your own relationships, what your breakups were like, how your parents reacted to your dating. And if you didn't date in high school, then I'm sure you had friends that dated in high school, or you were around somebody that had some sort of relationship and a breakup. So try and think about how those breakups and relationships happened, and I want you to write as many details as you can about that so you can have a good basis to compare and contrast Adnan and Hay's relationship with yours. Okay, so then you can listen to the podcast. A lot of you would like to listen to your podcast in the car or while you're doing the dishes or while you're making your bed, whatever. I do too. I like to listen to podcasts when I'm doing other things. That's what the best part about a podcast. So you don't have to watch anything, but you can still be in the story. But I really want to remind you that you should be listening and following along in your transcript, which is your textbook, and doing your annotations in your transcript as you listen. It's really important for you to record your thinking. This should be a scholarly activity for you. So make sure that even if you do listen in the car, that you come home, you sit down, and you listen again with your transcript open, recording your thinking and especially your questions. This podcast creates lots of questions, and those questions are going to help you with some of the assignments that we're going to talk about this week, and also will help you with your argument project at the very end of the semester. So just a little reminder, you should be annotating and doing some really deep thinking as you're listening to the episodes. The next task that you're going to be asked to do is an informal writing assignment. This informal writing assignment sort of tags along with Serial, where Serial talks about how Adnan and Hay had to keep secrets about their relationship. And I want you to think about secrets that you had to keep. I want you to think about one that might have some internal conflict. And I want you to set that stage. Give me the background. Explain what the situation is. And then I want you to think about if there was a devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other. What kind of a conversation would they be having? How would they be arguing, telling you what to do? So make sure to write that dialogue down. And lastly, what did you decide to do? How did this all turn out? What was the outcome of your decision? So that is your informal writing task. So I can't wait to read this. This is one of the former students' favorite writing assignments, is this about the secrets. So this is one that I really enjoy reading. So I'm really excited to see what you have to say with this one. All right, next is the personal narrative. This is the week we really kick off our first big paper, the personal narrative. And the definition is written on your screen there, and I'm just going to read that. A personal narrative is a story that is told autobiographically. Narration is a highly effective persuasion tool that can be used in any discipline. It is human nature to relate to and connect with stories. A good story will get people engaged and hold their attention. It is the goal of the author to convince their audience to go along with their story. So the reason that we're doing a personal narrative as our first narrative, we have a whole bunch of reasons. The first reason is I'm going to get to know your writing and you through your personal narrative. The second reason is being able to tell a good story. You can use that in any paper that you write and in any other situation in life. If you can tell a good story, then people are going to pay attention to what you're writing. And in order for you to convince anybody of anything, you have to get their attention and keep them interested in what you're writing. And storytelling is the way to do that. It's very difficult to tell stories in certain situations, so we're going to start off with a story that you care about. And we're going to make sure that you're going to be telling it as a well-told story. That's one of the 3 components of a personal narrative, is it has to be a well-told story. We want you to tell it in such a way that is so compelling that we can't put it down. And usually, really good stories have a dramatic arc. And you've all learned about this dramatic arc throughout your schooling. It starts off with the setting and the meeting of the characters, so we're centered in the story. And then you have the rising action, and then you have the climax, and then you have the falling action and the denouement, right? Conclusion. We want you to have that dramatic arc. It might look a little different than that. It depends on how you organize your work, but we want you to tell a good story. And a good story needs to have a vivid description. The description needs to be so good that as I'm reading your story, I feel and see and hear and touch all the things that you do in your story. I want you to be able to use details in such a way that I feel like I'm there. And then the most important part, the most important component of a personal narrative is the so what, which usually comes toward the end. That so what has autobiographical significance, right? It gives the meaning to the story. It's what you learned from this experience. It is the meat of it. So when you read it, you go, so what? Oh, I see. Not who cares, but I see why you wrote this. I see why it's meaningful. That so what is really important. And so we're going to be talking about so what's from now on. And we're going to use that language, the so what, right? Why did they write it? So what? Oh, that's why. And so that's really important. And it's kind of slippery. So we're going to keep coming back to what's the so what? How did they portray that so what? How did they communicate that so you felt it too? Just so you know, there is a document that has been put into content that's called Beginning the Personal Narrative. You can see a little picture of the first part of it on your screen there. That goes through all of the stuff that I'm talking about right now, and it's in writing, so you can print that off if you want to and have that right, so you don't have to keep coming back to this presentation and re-listening or anything. So that's there for you. The things that we're going to be studying with the personal narrative is there's a list over here on the right. It's in the dark part of your screen. Verb tense is one thing that we're going to be studying because verb tense needs to match what you're talking about. We'll talk about that. Description, I've already talked about that, but that also includes dominant impression. There should be some sort of a dominant impression as you're writing, and we'll talk about that probably next week, I think. Dialogue. Dialogue is required to be in your personal narrative. So we'll talk about how that happens and how it elicits tone and how it provides the specificity of the story for your reader. We're also going to talk about how to organize your paper into acts. We'll do that later on this week, and I will talk about that later on in this presentation. And I already talked about the so what. We're going to talk about that and how to incorporate that into your own story so it has significance. And then we're also talking about audience. Audience is always important to think about when you write anything. And when there's a change in audience, there's usually a change to the story and how it's told. You would tell the same story to me in a different way than you would tell to your best friend, for example. The language that you use, the structure that you use, the details that you use, you might adapt a little bit. You might leave some stuff out when you're telling me because I'm your teacher, right? But with your friend, you might give every little detail. Does that make sense? So we need to talk about audience as well. So this is the introduction to your personal narrative. And then you're going to be doing a little bit of pre-writing. This is on your personal discussion board, the writer's notebook discussion board, or your 7-minute writing discussion board. And this is where you're going to just follow the directions. Read this. And again, this is on the beginning, the personal narrative document that you can print out, and you'll have this. I just copied it right into the slide from that worksheet. So make sure that you just follow 1, 2, 3, those directions. But would you please note the brief note at the bottom? If you have this all talks about brainstorming about how your life is in comparison to Serial, right? Brainstorm in your writer's notebook discussion board how Woodlawn High School is like your high school, right? This is all about Serial. Choose one place of intersection between your life and any aspect of Serial, right? And then in your writer's notebook discussion board, outline and briefly summarize that story. If this is not something you really care about, you don't have to write that for your personal narrative. This is a way to get you thinking about it a little bit. But if you have in mind a topic that you care about that has no relation to Serial, that's absolutely fine. What I want is for you to write a story that means something to you, that has meaning to you, and that you care about it. Because that passion that you're going to bring to the story is going to make it a great story. So just because we're talking about dances and we're talking about breaking up in high school does not mean you have to write about your high school sweetheart at all. If that is the story that you want to tell, that's fine. But I want you to find something that you care about, that has meaning for you, and that has a really good so what. Okay, so still do this personal narrative pre-writing. It is on your discussion board, and see what you can come up with. This just might be some pre-writing, and you might use it and you might not, or you might use part of it and you might not, but still do it. It's still do. Okay. All right. The next thing that you're going to be doing is you're going to be reflecting on 2 essays. The 2 essays are School Days and The Physics of Forbidden Love. These documents are also posted in content. And what you're going to be doing is you're going to be really zeroing in on the 6 traits of writing, just like we did last week when we talked about A Sin by Brian Doyle. Now you're going to be bringing that same stuff to School Days and The Physics of Forbidden Love. And also, I would like you to try and see the markers of the genre personal narrative, right? Is it a well-told story? What kind of description does it have? Where is the dialogue? What's the so what? I want you to try and think of all those things and annotate for them as you read it. There is a discussion board up for this that you will be writing by Wednesday and then replying to your peers by Friday. And I have a bunch of things for you to think about and write about that kind of relate to craft on this. This is a mentor text. These are both personal narratives. You should be looking for things that work within these essays so you can steal them and try them in your own personal narrative. Take notes about what you like, the styles that you like that you can use in your own personal narrative. Okay, and also, of course, react to the content. These are fantastic personal narratives. I want you to talk about that as well. Okay, And this is just a quick overview of part 2. All right, so I'm just going to do this quickly. There's going to be 2 more presentations for you to view. One is about breaking story into acts. It's a voice thread, and you'll be practicing breaking stories into acts. The next one is the Curiosity Quest introduction. It's a video explaining this assignment, and this assignment will be due every 4 weeks. So in week 4, your first Curiosity Quest is due, and then in week 8, right, and so on. So there's a presentation about that, and I think there might be 2 videos. I think there's 2 videos in there that you will be watching, and then the documents are also posted, and that has its own little folder, the Curiosity Quest folder, that's in week 2, so you can check that out and understand that assignment. You have another discussion board for mentor texts. So there are 2 more mentor texts that you will read together and do the same kind of thing that you did with the first 2. Clearly, you're going to do the first 2 before you do these 2, right? And actually, I want you to do those first 2 school days and the physics of forbidden love before you start on part 2 of week 2, because the one of the presentations, like breaking the story into acts, actually uses one of those previous mentor texts. So try and do that in order. Make sure you have those 2 mentor texts done, the discussion board done before you start on part 2 of week 2. Okay? And here's your next 2 essays that you will be reading and looking at craft. The directions for the discussion board are on the discussion board. And you'll be reading The Good Daughter and What White Food Meant to a First Generation Kid. And then lastly, this is the part where I want you to just chill out, but you will be writing your first draft on your personal narrative. On the discussion board, there is a document. It's a short little story by Anne Lamott. It's called Shitty First Drafts. And read it. Just skim it. It's funny, and it gives you a sense of what you need to be doing. We also like to call this a brain dump, because that's what it is. It's just getting your ideas down, trying to figure out what your topic is, and getting all the ideas down. My favorite quote is the one in the upper right-hand corner. It says, "I'm writing a first draft and reminding myself that I'm simply shoveling sand into a box so that later I can build castles." That's exactly right. You need to just shovel the sand right now. Just put all the little sand grains in the box, and you can get rid of some later. You just need enough sand in order to build your castle. So don't panic. You're just going to sit down and write and get all the story out. That's your job. And that's the last thing you should do this week. And this is due in the assignment folder. All assignment folders are closing on Friday. So make sure you check that out, and just know that everything closes and you won't be able to get back in after the due date. So check your due date and make sure that you have everything done before that due date. Okay, so I think that is all for my discussion here. And if you have questions, you can ask them in the question discussion board, or you can email me. But I think that you can do it, and I'm excited to start reading your work.